Thank you very much, Steffi. I'm really glad being here again. And I also have to say it's great to be in this audience. It's quite impressive to be on a circular floor. That's new and quite impressive. I would like to welcome my three partners in this discussion. That's Alex Piutti in online, then it's Emilie online, and Kilian. And I think it's best if each one of them introduces themselves with their company, and then we understand what they're doing. And each one of them is working in the circular economy and facing different challenges, and that's what we will be talking about in a couple of seconds. So please, Alex, can you get started telling us more about you and about SPRK?
Yeah, so thanks for having me. It's really a pleasure to be here. Maybe you can switch on the slides. Appreciate. Okay. So can you see the slides?
Apparently we can. We can't because here the slides don't work, but I heard from the audience that they can see the slides.
Excellent, yeah. So my name is Alex, I'm the founder and CEO of SPRK Global. Our mission is to really eliminate food waste in the supply chain and drive down climate damage. 2.5 billion tons of food are getting wasted every year, which is crazy. 750,000 truckloads every day. Which causes 10% of all greenhouse gas emissions, being one of the largest CO2 emitters on this planet. Not good. So why is that? The global food supply chain is broken. There's a lack of efficiency when it comes to resource utilization, obviously, and 40% of food overproduction, insane. At the same time, it's a huge opportunity to fix the supply chain, drive value creation, and protect resources. So what's our solution? Our solution is a global B2B food exchange which doesn't exist, creating massive efficiencies. And how does it work? So basically it's an AI-driven distribution platform because there is no B2B food exchange in place, which fascinated me, matching supply and oversupply with relevant demand channels like canteens, industry caterers, production companies, NGOs, and gastronomy. Also, there's a wonderful opportunity turning surplus into circular products like soups, jams, fruit salad, frozen dishes, while collaborating with IFS certified food producers. Now, obviously our business model is to trade and make money. However, there's an opportunity to innovate business model. So I've looked at Tesla and Tesla's financial success, and we do something quite similar. So we're creating CO2 credits for our partners, driving value and helping them to drive down and offset their CO2 footprint. So far, we've rescued 150 tons of food, translating into close to 400,000 meals or close to 400 tons of CO2. And obviously, we can't do this by ourselves. So we've onboarded large partners like Compass Group, producing 5.5 billion meals per year as a demand partner, a leading system integrator, and also folks like GS1D and Fraunhofer, to help us implement our CO2 certificate. Now, join our alliance, bringing powerful systemic change to the planet. And if I may ask you to help, it'd be fantastic if you provided intros to executives in food supply companies or food processing companies. And we're in process of raising our Series A, which is about 10 million. And I'm thrilled to tell you, I'm not kidding you, the first million hit our bank account today. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Alex. It sounds so good, but it doesn't sound so easy. And I think in particular, changing the mindset of people to accept and to change their behavior is probably one of the key challenges for you. Could you tell us a bit more what kind of mindset we have to change, we as consumers, but maybe also the industry or government?
Yeah, so mindset change is like one of the key drivers, really. And most people talk about mindset change when it comes to consumers, as you mentioned, yeah, because like that is something we can control when we look at our fridge at home, for example, yeah. But something quite similar holds true for the entire industry: mindset change. Yeah, to give you an example, most of the food production occurs with a lead time of a couple of weeks, if not months. Yeah. So for them to source part of their food, which is needed for food production on the spot market, requires a change in process and a change in mindset. Yeah. So picture any food production company in the world or in Germany, say like, well, if they outsourced part of their food on a spot market like SPRK, the problem of food waste would disappear.
And you mentioned AI as one of the technologies you're using. Where do you need it most? Is it important to match oversupply and demand? Because that's probably a challenge for you as well, to get that matched.
Yes, I mean, like obviously our distribution platform is all about matchmaking, right? And you know, it'd be pretty good if it's real time. So for example, if you had 4 tons of meat and you would tell us right now and we would be able to match it like the next minute, that's pretty good. Yeah. But however, if it's real time, oftentimes it's too late. When people advertise their oversupply, you know, the so-called best before date or Mindesthaltbarkeitsdatum already hit. Yeah. So we have to be better than real time and move into an, you know, anticipating or predictive mode. Yeah. And this is where technology kicks in. So think about system integration, you know, producing APIs between our platform and, you know, folks like, you know, retailers, wholesalers, production companies, agriculture. So before the fact, yeah, and things move in patterns, like the next harvest will come for sure. Yeah, so like these are all pieces of data we can consolidate, put into our machine basically, and then start predicting and avoid food waste.
Thanks, Alex. We'll come back to you in a couple of minutes, but first we would like to hear another guest, and that is Emilie. And when we talk about Emilie, it means also we stay within the food area, because Emilie is running Oddbox. And so I'd like you, Emilie, to introduce yourself as well as Oddbox so that we all know what you're doing. And it's a different angle you're tackling the food market.
Thanks, Fritz. Yes. Also tackling food waste, but with a slightly different solution, but kind of dealing with the same issue of trying to match demand or kind of supply with demand. So if we can move on to the slides. So I'm Emilie, I'm co-founder and CEO of Oddbox, the UK's largest sustainable fruit and veg box tackling food waste at farm level. And what we do is we provide an easy, tasty and convenient way for people to fight climate change. As Alex mentioned, as we all know, there's a climate emergency. But actually, as Alex mentioned, what very few people know is that food waste is actually the third largest contributor to greenhouse gases. And at farm level, actually around 15% of the food we produce is wasted even before it reaches the shelves of the supermarkets due to tight criteria laid by supermarkets or because it's surplus to requirements. And at the same time, we obviously all want to make better choices for the planet, but we find it difficult to know exactly what to do and whether it actually makes a difference. And so at Oddbox, we've tried to implement an easy solution, which is a win-win solution for growers, consumers, and the planet. So the way we work is we work directly with growers and we buy from them produce which are perfectly good quality but don't meet supermarket specification or are surplus to requirements. So whether it's too big, too small, too odd, or too much. And we make sure that we pay them a fair price for this produce that they put so much effort into growing. From the customer side, they actually get a weekly surplus of seasonal produce delivered to their door, but they also know that they are having a huge impact tackling climate change because we provide them on a monthly basis with their personalized impact score, which explains how much they've contributed in terms of reducing, in terms of saving resources. we launched 5 years ago, and since we launched, we've delivered over 2.5 million boxes in the UK. We now deliver to a community of close to 100,000 people across the UK, and we work with close to 100 different fresh produce suppliers. And together with our community, we've rescued close to 15,000 tons of produce from going to waste. That's the equivalent in water of what 25,000 people need in their lifetime. And actually, it's only a small drop in the ocean. So we're just only starting. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Emilie, you said it looks very much like a supply-led and not much a consumer-led model. Can you help us understand what makes the difference if you have a supply-led model for the suppliers as well as for the consumers? We can't hear you right now. Once again, please.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, now it works.
Perfect. So as Alex mentioned, actually we're in a society or in a world where we can get everything delivered to us in the next 10 minutes nowadays. And that creates huge overproduction because it's still very difficult to forecast what will grow at any point of time. And so what we're trying to shift is that it's moving from a demand-led to a supply-led model. And for the customers, that means it's not necessarily very convenient because they don't get exactly what they want, but that makes people more creative. And that's actually the only way we're going to really solve the issue of food waste. The way we work with our growers is we'll contact them on a weekly basis, we'll get details of what's available, and we'll make the boxes on the basis of what's available, but still taking into consideration the fact that we can't only put potatoes every week in our boxes. So it's a balance of trying to kind of be supply-led, whilst at the same time making sure that we don't push food waste into people's home.
It very much sounds like the good old days when you just were orienting your own cooking behavior towards what is available in the season. But right now, typically, I understand most people take a recipe and then they go shopping and try to get what they... But yours is going back to the old way. Do you help your consumers to find recipes or find ideas what they can do with the food that they get?
Yeah, so for us every week in the box we put tips on, first of all, how to store the produce, how to cook and make the most of the produce. We also provide a lot of information on why they receive this type of produce, what's in season, and there's a huge part which is about education. And actually, a lot of people don't know where our produce are grown, don't know what's in season. And also what we were shocked to discover is that people don't really know the link between food waste and climate change. Only 30% of people realize that actually food waste is a huge contributor to climate change.
So there's quite something we still can learn. And it's not just in food, but also in electronics. And that brings me to our next guest, that's Kilian. He's running Refurbed, and so it would be interesting to learn what you're doing there and what Refurbed is doing in the circular economy.
Sure, yeah, thank you very much. It's a really honor to be here, so thank you very much, Steffi and the whole DLD team. I think it's great what you have achieved here with this conference, and especially also bringing together startups like us together with the corporate world. I think it's really important for having the innovators together. Secondly, I have to admit that I was so happy to have an in-person event again that I haven't created slides. I want to do a verbal version, so please excuse that for me. I'm founder of Refurbed. Refurbed is the fastest growing refurbished marketplace in the German-speaking region. Before I founded Refurbed, I was in charge of launching the whole Amazon refurbished program in Europe from the United States. So my first touch points with the refurbished industry. And with Refurbed, we want to tackle the fastest growing waste stream in the world, which is electronic waste. When you think about in Germany, for example, an average smartphone is used for 1.8 years. At the same time, we have more than 200 million smartphones in the cupboards of our households. All of these products contain rare elements, they contain extremely valuable resources, which has to go back into the industry and not stay in the cupboards of our households. So what we wanted to create is we want to create a new business model which allows us to reuse devices, so that we can use more devices for a longer period of time. And in this regard, we have two main constraints. The first big constraint are manufacturers, because manufacturers try their best of reducing the possibility to repair devices. So when you look into the new generation of devices in all of the electronic industries, we see it's getting more and more complex to repair a device, which of course is horrible. And you think about that you have a device which mainly only the battery has to be changed, but you cannot do it because the battery is too complex to repair. At the same time, we have the issue of software obsolescence, that after 3 to 5 years, you cannot update the software anymore, and you are forced to change your device, even if it's still working perfectly. And this is something which has to be tackled on a policy maker base. But the second big issue as well is also the pricing for sustainability. I think when we're all thinking about what kind of sustainable products we have, it could be sustainable fashion, it could be bio-food, it's always more expensive to buy sustainable than to buy non-sustainable. And in our case, with refurbished devices, we are able to provide electronic devices which are cheaper than a new product, but at the same time have a warranty, and you also be much more sustainable. Up to 70% less CO2 emissions are created, and of course, massively less electronic waste because the lifetime is prolonged. And this is an important factor, because when you're looking on the average of society, not everyone can afford sustainable consumption. So we also want to be the first step for people to go into sustainable consumption, and maybe then use the saved money to also move into different industries for also consume their products more sustainable. And therefore we try not only as Refurb itself, but also myself, I'm part of a couple of expert circles and associations on the European level, which fights for the right to repair, so that we make it easier for everyone to repair devices and prolong the lifetime of electronic devices.
Thanks a lot. Now we probably also have to talk again about changing customer mindset, because my impression is if I was running an e-commerce company myself in electronics, and I understand that whenever we had something refurbed, people felt like, is that good quality? Is the battery still working? And what kind of prejudices are you faced with then, and how do you overcome them on the consumer side?
Yeah, I think it's a really big topic, especially because the majority of people, they know new products and they know used products, but they don't know this like new category in the middle, which is really close to the new category, which are products which are totally functional and maybe only the outside look. So there could be like some scratches or something, or maybe they're even perfect. This is a difference. And for creating there a new atmosphere which allows people to trust in these refurbished devices, what we, for example, doing is that on our platform, everyone who buys a product can return it after 30 days for no reason. So to just giving the people the opportunity to try it. And the really interesting thing is that the majority of people think, when you're thinking about it's cheaper, you have a warranty and it's sustainable, that the majority of people think that's too good to be true. I mean, there has to be some flaw, because that cannot be true, then everyone will do it. But this, on the other hand, helps us a lot to even overestimate the expectation of the customer, because then they get a device which literally promises what we say, and they think, hey, this is something which we have to tell our friends, our family, or other people. And for this reason, more than 60% of our customers coming from referrals. Which kind of shows that the people which are trying out our products, they love them and they buy them again. And I think this is an important factor to, show them what it is and get them the first experience themselves, and then you create the trust automatically.
And does it also mean, I think many people, probably also some of us, have some old phones in their cupboards, and they also have these scarce resources. Does that help you if they would just clean their cupboards and then send them to you, or to other places where we just make sure that they are not just there, and we can reuse them and also enter them into the circular economy?
I mean, absolutely. I think, it was greatly mentioned before from BMW as well. Reuse should always be the first option, and the last option should be recycling. But still, if you think about what kind of elements are within this product, we should try to reuse them and refurbish them. And the last step could be still recycling and getting the gold, the cobalt, and whatever's in there out to reproduce again and manufacture new devices from them. But in the end of the day, what we did is we created also like a buyback program with our company, so that we do not only sell refurbished devices, but also that you can, as a customer or like a private person, a company, whatever, sell your old devices back to us so that they go back into the circle. Because our goal is to change the linear economy to a circular economy, and we want to be part of this movement and lead the possibilities for every customer around Europe to be able to do that in the future.
I think I would like to invite the other two as well, so that we have a more general discussion. And I would like to start with prejudices, because we have talked about prejudices of our customers, but also of others. What are the prejudices you are faced with, and maybe also which ones have you overcome yourself when you started to think about what you're doing? Maybe you also had another different mindset, and what made it change. Alex, would you like to start?
Sure, yeah, it's a really interesting topic. So when you look at food waste, most people, when they hear food waste, they kind of stop thinking and just leave it as a problem, right? So like, okay, so huge problem, right? Not good, yeah? But to allow yourself to think about it as a potential, as a solution, as a business model even, right? So we talked about mindset change. That is the key, for most people to continue the discussion and say, well, actually, it's not negative, it's positive, right? So if we change it to the better, we're making money, which is entirely normal, basically, yeah? Changing the industry, that is something, call it psychology in the industry, which we need to crack, yeah? To embrace topics and don't just stop at saying, it's a problem, we stop right there. But to picture success, which I'm telling my teams and also like industry partners, say like, what if we crack this problem in 5 years? How fantastic would it be? Yeah. Think about the climate implications, the resource implications. Think about your employees. Yeah. Think about the credibility of actually having it done as a solution, right? And that engages many people becoming our partners to say, oh, well, actually, you're right. Okay, it sounds like a no-brainer. Why don't we participate? So like to move away prejudice and move people into thinking positive, as opposed to like quoting 7 reasons why it can't work. Yeah. And we can do, all the tricks possible when it comes to technology, but that comes later on. Yeah. So building technology something we learned, but to really crack, prejudice and allowing folks to think about success, that comes first. Yeah. And this is where we need help. It's not because like we can't achieve it as a company, but we need to think ecosystem. Yeah. Just like the other people in the room, circularity, like building business cases where all parties benefit, basically. This is the key challenge, to create a momentum and then move into the solution. I think it's entirely possible. It won't take long, 4 or 5 years, maybe, as opposed to 20 years or 30 years, but we need to embrace, the opportunity.
Emilie, you found similar prejudices or completely different ones?
Yeah, so similar, and actually, I think the word waste is not useful. So we talk on a macro level about food waste being kind of a third of all the food we produce across the chain is wasted. Actually, it's only wasted, it's surplus, and then it becomes waste. So when we think about surplus, then there's a more positive mindset about the food. And also, the notion of waste is not very well understood, because what we define at Oddbox, what we define as kind of waste or surplus is anything which doesn't go for human consumption. So it's not necessarily something which will end up in landfill. It's potentially food which is grown will stay in the field and for the growers become what they call as compost. It's food which might go for animal feed when actually it was not meant to go for animal feed. It's food which will go to produce energy in anaerobic digestion plants, which were actually plants created to deal with the issue of excess food. And it's food which might eventually also go to landfill. But when we were speaking to growers, actually, a lot of them were saying, we don't have any food waste. Because for them, if it stays in the field, it's not food waste. If there's very little which eventually goes to landfill, they will find lower alternatives or lower value alternatives to make sure that they don't waste. But it's still not the best use of the food.
So we need
And
also
so we had to we had to work a lot with the grower, and especially because we were not from the industry, to kind of really show that we were there to provide a solution and not to blame them for the issue. And there's underreported data on the food waste, especially at farm level. So overall, there's been very little research on how much food is wasted at farm level.
So we should have much more
Just to add
transparency.
to Emilie, if I may, right?
Sure.
I fully agree and support. If you think about this 40% food overproduction, right, which is intransparent, it's fragmented, but it's 40% of all food is overproduced. Yeah. And there was a company or an ecosystem consolidating all this fragmented, food oversupply into one party and turning that into a value-add product. Not like reducing the value, but enhancing the value. Moving from tomato to tomato soup to tomato ketchup. Yeah. Increasing the value, producing a business case, creating profits, basically. Yeah. What if there was a party to consolidate these 40%, basically? And people don't talk about landfill or compost anymore. They think about, hey, that's an opportunity to create value-add products like tomato soup. Yeah. So all of a sudden, you're changing the psychology and you're changing the prejudice into like the business case, right? It's a huge impact business case.
And I think right now a lot of focus, especially in the UK and I think in majority of Europe, has been on redistribution. So kind of acting at the end of the chain of let's make sure that there's no food wasted at retail level and that all the surplus food in store gets redistributed. But actually, it's like recycling. It doesn't solve the initial issue. So it's just a bit of a band-aid solution that governments are putting on the issue.
So we definitely need more transparency in the whole food waste and more statistics to be more active there. And is that similar in electronics? Do we also need more transparency there?
For sure, yeah. I mean, one of the big problems of electronic waste, or at the end of the lifetime of devices, is normally that they get shipped to developing countries like Africa or Asia, which then in the end is not only harming the environment, but in general also the health of the people living in these areas. So that has to be also one of the reasons why we have to start thinking about how we can improve the reuse of the devices or the recycling, because right now it's often cheaper to ship a still working old PC to Africa than to recycle it on a professional base in Europe. And this is something which has to be tackled not only from the people which are using the devices or the companies which are using the devices, but also from the policymakers, because in the end of the day, there we have to develop a lot in the direction of a more circular economy, and that the devices which are in Europe have to stay in kind of a way in Europe to refurbish them or even then recycling them in the end, but to keep the resources here and not shipping them in developing countries.
Since we're running out of time, I have one chance for you, but also a question, which is the same. You have an audience that is not just consumers, but they're also influencers. You have a chance for a call to action. Each one of you, think about what would be your most important call to action to the audience, and feel free, whatever it is. Alex, you want to start?
How much time do I have? How many call to actions may I formulate?
Not more than 1 minute.
The most important one is to really team up, and that sounds so obvious, yeah, but to construct business models where there's more parties involved than just one or two. Yeah. So when we create new business models around food waste, for example, which is a wonderful problem to crack, we need to embrace our supply partners, our demand partners, technology partners, yeah, and think about like in an empathy, what's in it for them, basically. Yeah. So stop pitching the solution, but to really construct a solution which entails all these people, which is complicated, but it stabilizes your own business model. Yeah. So like my call to action is to really stay engaged and talk about opportunities, how to team up, how to create mutual business models, basically, while driving down the problem.
Emilie.
Yeah, so my call to action would be kind of as individual, actually as consumers, we have quite a lot of power, and every time we buy, every time we consume, we actually make a decision to do the right thing or do the wrong thing. And so for me, it's actually, I feel that food is right now too cheap. It's too cheap because it doesn't capture actually the resources which go into growing, into renewing the soil, into kind of replacing the resources which have gone into producing the food we consume. So my call to action is to kind of be quite mindful about how you consume, what you buy, and also to kind of not overconsume. And just kind of on a micro level, just a small fact. Did you know that to produce 1 kilo of potato, it takes 300 liters of water, and 300 liters of water is the equivalent of 3 showers. So actually wasting 1 kilo of potato is wasting the equivalent of 3 showers. So it's just kind of the impact that food waste has is enormous. So on an individual level, it's just kind of about being mindful about the things you buy.
Kilian.
Yeah, I mean, both points absolutely valid, and I totally agree to them. To the additional point, not like as repeating what they already mentioned, I would say, I think it's really important that we also have to, on an economy level, thinking about how we can create business models which combine profitability and sustainability. Because currently it's often still the case, a lot of business models play against each other. If you want to establish your business more sustainable, it costs you more money than you make with unsustainable business models. And I think to be having a real big impact on a global level, also like the global players which we have in this world, have to switch to an idea that how they can restructure the business model in a way that sustainability is always the first choice, and they do not have to always fight against their calculations on a shareholder value perspective, which of course is really important, and therefore deciding to the less sustainable option. And that is what personally I strongly see all the time when I'm on the European Commission level, and there the lobbyism side is there, and always try to massively reduce the positive actions on the proposals because of exactly this reason of shareholder value. And therefore I think this, if we are able to switch to more business models which combine both, then we can literally tackle climate change as fast as possible, and it's really required that we do that.
It sounds like...
Fritz, if I may add one point, which is really important to me personally, is to also engage, the weaker parties in the society and the people in need. Yeah? So if we keep digitizing, innovating, basically, it's all about stakeholder value. Something I learned at Wharton was like shareholder value, which is obsolete. It doesn't exist anymore. If you just optimize against the market, you won't move into your full potential. Yeah? But if you include weak parties like NGOs, for example, so we've given 100 tons of food for free to Arche, for example. Yeah? So like to make them part of the game, make them part of the ecosystem. This is just to add to Kilian's point. We need to think about business models which also integrate and systematically integrate the people in need and the weaker parties.
Fully agreed. Sounds like we're just in the beginning of a circular economy. There's a lot to do, and in particular, it's not just talking Sundays, it means acting Mondays. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Fritz. Thank you, amazing panel. For me, the three of you a new generation of European startups. You are the role model of the next generation, which are not working the best to be in the world, but the best for the world, as Jens said earlier. I'm very proud that you are here. I hope, my dear audience, that they inspired you as they inspired me. I'm very happy that you have been at DLD. I hope we see us in real time sooner or later. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.